In this video, I'm going to show you one of the more interesting things you can do with the WPF and XAML. I'm going to show you how you can do 3D. And I'm going to do it all in this program called XAMLpad. XAMLpad is a program where we can go in here and just start typing stuff, some type of controls, and automatically they start getting thrown up on the screen here. So I can just go in here and say like the width of something, and now we have something with a width. And I can put in more controls under other controls, and you'll see that I don't have to compile and do all the Visual Studio type stuff, and it just kind of happens right away. So we don't have to wait for the overhead of compiling. Very nice. So like I say, today we're going to discuss 3D. As I showed in previous videos, what we can actually do with XAML is basically anything. It's how we do controls. You just saw me put up buttons and stuff. So we put up buttons, and we put up, you know, everything you could do in a WinForm, basically. All that kind of stuff. But we can take it a step further by doing our 3D in here as well. We don't need to tap into the world of direct 3D directly. Deep down, that's what's happening, but we don't need to work that kind of stuff directly. And not only that, we don't even need to touch the C# VB.NET world. Everything I'm doing here, and everything I'm going to do, we can go ahead and do in C# and VB.NET, but I'm going to go ahead and do it in XAML. We're not even going to open Visual Studio in this video. So, there's a few things you need to know about 3D, okay? And I'm just going to kind of go over some of the 3D concepts as I go along. Basically, we have to start out with a viewport. And what we're basically talking about is a viewport 3D. That's the object we're talking about. So now we have viewport 3D. A viewport 3D is basically where the 3D is. Okay, so we're going to put some sort of 3D in here. It could be some objects, or rotating this, or rotating that, or some kind of charts in 3D moving around or whatever. And we can go ahead and have buttons above it and below it. It's just this little portion of 3D in the world. But that is where the 3D goes. Now, when we're working in the 3D world, we need a few things. And if you're used to the two-dimensional world in terms of graphics, you'll remember that you have, you know, a square plane, a Cartesian plane. You have an X and a Y. And basically, you just plot things on it. You know, something goes down here at 0, 0, the origin, and 1, 1, 2, 2, and, you know, maybe this is 2, 1, this is 1, 2 over here, and you start putting things all over the screen. And you really are just looking at it. You are basically the camera in this whole world. You're looking at it, you're seeing things. And what you're seeing is basically the viewport. So this is the viewport, and one of the things we need is we have to put our eyes in here somewhere. In the 3D world, we're working in an X, a Y, and a Z axis, which goes out. So what we basically have to do is we have to get into this world. We have to basically stand somewhere and look somewhere. And how we do this is we set up a camera. Basically, we hold a camera. And this is with viewport 3D camera. And we're going to put a camera somewhere. See, this guy will show up as red if we're doing something wrong. Right now it's saying it can't be empty. Well, that sounds about right. We didn't put anything anywhere. What we're basically going to do is we're going to put in a thing called a perspective camera. And then we're just going to put some properties on this. This camera is going to be somewhere, basically where we're standing, and it's going to look in a certain direction towards something. And we want to look from a certain place, and that's going to be the position. And I'm going to be standing at point 1, point 1, point 1. So 1 unit in X, 1 unit in Y, 1 unit in Z. Just somewhere out in the universe. We only have 1 point, so there's no place to really put it. There's no frame of reference here. So we got to set the destination. So we got to set where we are and where we're looking. And that's the second thing. We're going to be looking in a certain direction here. Basically this way here. Simple look direction here, and have a little field of view here. How wide do we want to be looking here? About 90. And I'm going to set up an up direction here, just warm and fuzzy, because I want up to be at the y-axis. Okay? And that's really all I'm going to set here. And this is the perspective camera. Right now we have a camera somewhere at 111 pointing in the direction of -1, -1, -1. And that's all we have to do with the camera. Right now we have a plane, or rather we're looking somewhere in some 3D universe. Okay? We're looking from somewhere to somewhere. And now the thing that gets really confusing is I'm saying that I'm standing here, I'm looking over here, right? Well, basically we are going to be holding the camera sitting in our chairs here, or standing by our desks, wherever we are. So we're going to be staring at it, and if the object's in front of us, it's just going to be right out here. We're just going to see it as though this person over here would see it looking over here. I know that's rather confusing, but I'm sure you'll get it. Okay, so then what we have to do is we have to put some models in here. Basically some sort of shapes and all kinds of other things. And we do this by model visual 3D. And now mind you, I might have videos in the future where I go over this stuff a lot slower and I go over each concept one by one. This is just a demonstration, so don't go ahead and try to learn everything. I do this stuff in an accelerated fashion, so you can go ahead and rewind the video and stuff like this and just look at it at your own pace, because that's what pausing and rewinding is all about. So we have this model visual 3D. And in here we want to put some content. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just copy this guy out, repaste it in, and say content. Now we're going to put some content in here. Okay. Blah, 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 can't be empty. I know, we're not done yet. So we go over here, we're going to put something in here. We're going to go ahead and put a model 3D group. Now, when we have all these nested things, you're going to be tempted to think, my goodness, what a lot of work. Would you like to see this done in Direct 3D? I don't think so. Okay, so here we go. We're going to, in here, we have a model 3D group. This is a group of 3D models. So not a big deal. Okay, so one of the things we're going to have to put in here is light. We got to have light somewhere, right? That's basically the second 3D concept. If the first really is 3D space, the second would be a camera. You're standing somewhere looking in a certain direction. The third would be light. You got to have lighting somewhere. You can have a directional light where it's somewhere, pointing somewhere. Or what we're going to do is basically cheat and say, just ambient light, light everywhere. So, ambient light of the color white. And fiat lux. There we go. So now we have light, which, you know, you can't really tell because it's white anyways, but believe me, now we have light. Or rather, believe me if there wasn't light before. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a geometry model. Okay, so now I have a geometry model. And one of the things we're going to go ahead and do in here is we're going to go ahead and put in two things. Geometry model is going to go ahead and have the geometry as well as a material that is some sort of skin on it. So we're going to go over here and say geometry. That's going to be the first one here. And then we're going to have a thing called material. Okay. So now I have both of these, and it's complaining there's nothing in there. That's understandable. Let's go ahead and open this up a little bit so you can see a bit more of what we're doing. That would actually make sense now. Now you can actually see what's going on. Okay. So what we're going to go ahead and do in here is we're going to set up a mesh geometry 3D. And it's just going to be by itself here. Go ahead and do it over here to make it easy on me. Then I'll tab it out to make it look good. And we're just going to describe this thing. So the first thing I want to do is put its positions of the points. Positions. Okay. And I want something in the lower left over here. Or I shouldn't say lower left. I should say minus 1x minus 1y. Okay. And we're going to do it all on one plane. We're just going to cheat. And basically it's going to be two-dimensional in a three-dimensional world. So then we're going to go ahead and say it's to the right 1, down 1 in the z-plane. Then we're going to go ahead and say over on the x1, up on the y, still over here, and then 1 in the upper right-hand corner. And we just use that terminology because it's easier. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and set up triangle indices. And this is the part that gets most people. It got me at least, and it gets most people in the forums. This is where we actually have to connect the world. We're going to be making a square. We have a guy down here. We have a guy down here. We have a guy up here. And we have a guy up here. Watch that again. We have a little point down here, a point down over here, a point up here, and a point over here. I just drew a Z when I did that in the explanation. You might not even have noticed that. Right here, right here, right here. You notice that triangle I drew when I just did that? That is what we're going to be building. We're going to be connecting this point to this point to this point. And then we're going to go ahead and connect this point to this point to this point to this point. So this guy, this guy, this guy, and then this guy, this guy, this guy. Somewhere in this counterclockwise manner, we're going to connect these guys. So I'm going to connect point 0. This is 0 based. So point 0, lower left, to the lower right, which is 1, to the upper left, which is 2. Then we're going to go ahead and connect the lower right to the upper right, then to the upper left. So there we go. That may not exactly be right, but we'll see what happens here. And the next thing I want to go ahead and do is skip down here. We're going to come back to that in a second. We're going to skip down here and put down a material. And the material I'm going to do is very simple. I'm going to put a diffuse material here. This is going to house something else in here. And then we're going to put a diffuse brush. Diffuse material, that brush rather. Okay, there we go. That's not exactly working because I can't spell. And I still can't spell. There we go. Let's just go ahead and see what happened here. Now we have this square somewhere in the 3D world. Just believe me, it's a square. I mean, in a two-dimensional world, if we're thinking in two-dimensional in the context, this is the weirdest looking thing in the world. It just doesn't make any sense. But it's a square, and we're looking at it at a certain angle. Okay? So one thing we can go ahead and do in here is make this a little easier to look at. You can see that we're going to be able to move this. We're going to be able to move around the camera here. Things are moving around, but it doesn't really make a sense what we're looking at. So let's go ahead and change this here and make this a little bit easier to work with. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to set up a linear gradient brush. And then in here, I'm going to go ahead and put linear gradient stops. So, gradient stops. You know, you can actually hit this button to stop the parsing and then refresh everything manually. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now so it doesn't trip out on me constantly. There we go. I'm going to say gradient stop, color. I mean, at one point here, we're going to say the color is going to be just blue. And then the offset is going to be at 0. Okay, but this is green. See what we got. There we go. Missed the spot there. So there we go. We see a big green square. Interesting. Where's the blue? Well, that's why we have to actually come back to this guy here, or this guy here. We have a texture down here, okay? This is a material, it's a texture, it's a skin, whatever terminology you want to use. They're a little bit different. As far as you're concerned right now, they're all the same. So, here we go. We're going to go ahead and put something on here. We're going to go ahead and say that the texture coordinates are, you know, these are something, you know, there's some sort of coordinates. And it's going to be two-dimensional, believe it or not. So we're going to say lower left, over here, this corner, and then connect these two. Let's see if this is right. We got 0, 0, yes, that looks good. And refresh. Auto parse rather. Oh, and then you'll see that I completely messed it up because we're stopping and ending at the same point. That doesn't make any sense. Now we have green. Now, believe me, if that wasn't there, you see it's this. So now we have the texture coordinates. Now we can actually see. Now, just trust me, this video is not going to come out that well. It's going to be kind of striped around here, but just trust me that this is a very nice, beautiful gradient. So there we go. We have this nice 3D guy. And what we can actually do is go ahead and move this guy around in the 3D plane here. Kind of move him. You can see it's actually moving up now. That's actually makes sense now. We can actually see it since it's a little far up to the sky there. Okay. Okay, and we can go ahead and move it in another direction. Now you can see it's heading back. And you can see if we go ahead, and it's going to go ahead and guess what? It's going to move this way. Oops. It's going to move over there. And then we can go ahead and change the up direction here just to confuse everybody. Now it's just facing flat here. Or it's just flat, rather. And now it's going to go ahead and slide around here. Okay. Let's go ahead and move this guy over a little bit here. There we go. Now watch this. This is the part that's going to be kind of trippy out. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this brush again and put something else in here. Put what we call a visual brush. And the visual brush doesn't have a gradient stop, but it does have visual. And one of the things the visual does is something that may make you fall out of your seat. Check this out. That's kind of weird, isn't it? A button. Let's go ahead and put that in some sort of a legible text there. Now it's actually backwards. That's interesting. Let's go ahead and fix this here. Let's go ahead and move this around here. Okay, now it's just completely upside down. Now it's just completely backwards. Kind of hacking this together here, but you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm kind of just moving stuff around in space, flipping it upside down and around here. Let's go ahead and look at our indices here and see what I can do about this. We actually just go ahead and fix our mapping of the coordinates here. I had it backwards. I'm a little slow with that. There we go. Okay. So now we actually see the button, and it's actually readable. And we can go ahead and put anything else we need into here. So let's go ahead and put a stack panel here. And now we have a bunch of buttons in here. They're not exactly clickable. We're looking at something nice and visual here. But you can go ahead and bind data to this. You can absolutely do that. And let me show you one more thing, then I'll go ahead and show you a really cool example of something I built recently just to do that as an example for somebody. Let's go ahead and put this stack panel here. And I actually want to put a button out here. Oops. And this button is just going to say stuff, I don't know, creative, right? And then I'm going to put the height on this. There we go. Now we have a button back behind that. So we have controls and 3D in the same place. Very cool. Put some more buttons over here. Now we're kind of pushing that down. So there we go. And we can still flip around our 3D and do all kinds of craziness. That totally made it disappear, but there we flipped it on its side. We're going to flip it upside down now. That's dandy. So we can do all kinds of craziness here. Let's go ahead and just put that at 0 here. There we go. Yeah, I like that one better actually. Let's go ahead and the z-axis is up. So there it went down. We do all kinds of craziness here, all within the comfort of our own 3D world. See, now I'm just totally raising it up. And you know, programmatically we can go ahead and have a lot of this stuff change and have stuff move around and whatever. And like I said, you can go ahead and data bind this. And let me show you an example of that real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and paste this example in. This right here is a 3D RSS reader I put together a couple nights ago. And this is very simple. It's about 50 lines of XAML here. And it live binds to this XML. And it puts an image in the back, and it puts gradients on this and all kinds of stuff. Let's go ahead and see if we can't get a little closer here by changing our focus a little bit. Kind of zoom in a bit, kind of cheat. So we can see I have all kinds of stuff here. You'll see that in my code here, what I'm actually doing is I actually have a 3D viewport, and I'm setting up a few resources here. These resources are just basically some sort of declarative metadata, which is data for data. Now we have declarative. This is declarative stuff for the declarative code. So we have resources, and we're declaring this XML guy, and then we're declaring this little style, which is for a text block called RSS title. And then RSS title here, these titles, I'm saying have the titles have these offsets on the foreground. Then I have another guy down here, the RSS text. It's kind of gray, kind of this font, and I believe I had a font up here too. That's for text block as well. So if we go down a little bit further, we actually have the camera here. We have our standard 3D objects here. We have an ambient light, and then within this geometry we have our mesh, and the material here we actually have a visual brush, and the visual brush actually is bringing in a stack panel, and it actually has a list box and is binding to this XML. In the background of the list box has this picture on there. And then I have a data template with this data. It's binding, picking and choosing what we want. The title for the titles, description for the description, the text. And that's basically all there is to it. I'll go ahead and scroll through this slowly. Well, first off, the namespaces are all going to be the same here. It's not really that big of a deal. But I'll go ahead and scroll through this really quick here so you can go ahead and take a look at the code. It's actually really not that complex, and this does actually live bind to the source. So as you can see, 3D in the WPF with XAML is very powerful, and everything you see here could actually be done in code. Most examples you'll see online are actually doing this stuff in code. So you can go ahead and create your objects on the fly and whatnot. Now this video is meant to be a demonstration. You're not meant to learn a thing from this, but if you do learn something, that's an extra bonus. Now as far as 3D theory and all that, there's all kinds of 3D theory on the internet. You can go ahead and read it. It's very simple, actually. Don't overthink it, don't overcomplicate it. As far as the XAML, go ahead and start typing in Visual Studio. The IntelliSense is amazing. Things will just fall together. You'll get errors where you mess stuff up. And there's great examples online. And you can go ahead and use this, as you're seeing on the screen, as a basis for any of whatever you're doing. So I hope this video was somewhat helpful to you.